Hello and welcome to a brand new series about authors whose works I pick up without even reading a blurb because I just trust them so much. Some of them are old favorites and nostalgic picks, while others are more recent additions. As usual, if you're here for the first time, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button and press the bell icon to stay notified. I thought I'd start this series with an old favorite, Alistair MacLean. I don't think there's anybody from my generation of Indians who hasn't read Alistair MacLean. You might have picked at least one book up in your childhood if you had to go to library class. MacLean wrote a very specific kind of literature. It's the mid-20th century thriller set either in the Second World War or in the Cold War afterwards. And to my mind, he's one of the best in the game. You know, he writes these really fast-paced action novels that are about spies and about danger, and it's very cinematic in scope. And in fact, a few of his novels did get made into movies, some of them better made and with a better budget and a better star cast, and others not as much. The 5 books that I'm going to be talking about in this video are my favorites, but I'm not going to say that these are the best MacLean novels. I'm just going to tell you the books that I love and why I have read pretty much every single book that he's ever written, even the ones that aren't all that great. So the first MacLean novel that I read was called The Golden Rendezvous, and it was one of those Reader's Digest condensed novels. I don't know if everybody out there knows what those are, but back in the day, Reader's Digest would take the most successful novels published in a year, and they would condense it into a smaller, more easily read package, I guess. But they would have like 4 books in one bound book. And they would excise, objectionable material. Sex. And for long, complicated reasons, when I grew up in my grandma's house, there was an entire wall full of these, and I would spend my summer afternoons just going through these at the rate of Skittles. And I discovered so many amazing authors that way. The Golden Rendezvous is considered one of his lesser books, but to me, it was the first book that I'd read, and I'd read it at a very impressionable age. So to me, it's great. And it's also a very traditional, romantic thriller because it's about this guy, and like a lot of MacLean heroes, he's just too cool for school. He's amazingly, frighteningly good at his job, which is basically, I think he's like second in command on this cruise ship. And he's also really good looking, and he's very fit, and he has excellent moral fiber, all the hallmarks of a typical MacLean hero. And then the ship gets hijacked, and there's all kinds of things, there's gold bullion, there's a nuclear warhead. I don't even know. But it's fun, it's got some great action pieces, and I really enjoy it. If you're looking for something that doesn't require too much effort on your part to read, then I really recommend The Golden Rendezvous. Next up is The Guns of Navarone, which is, again, a childhood favorite. So this is one of his World War II novels, and it's about a bunch of specialists who don't really know each other that well, who have to come together for a mission behind enemy lines. It's a classic story, and it's well told. Again, if you're a originality purist and you're like, well, why is this not original? I don't know what to tell you. It's a well-told genre novel. The bad guys are Nazis, the good guys are not Nazis, and things go boom. It was also made into a very successful film, as was this other film called Where Eagles Dare, which is based on another novel. And I also liked Where Eagles Dare, but I feel like the book of The Guns of Navarone is better than the film, and the film of Where Eagles Dare is better than the book. But your mileage may vary. Next up is one of his later novels, which is called The Way to Dusty Death. And this is one of his more pulpy novels, you know. It's about this race car driver who, and it's this very common trope that you'll find in MacLean novels where the hero pretends to be someone who he isn't, so that he can go behind enemy lines. And that's what this novel is about. It's a race car driver who is, again, frighteningly good at his job, but is trying to convince people that he is a horrible human being so that he can find the bad guys. This book is kind of the equivalent of watching a giant actioner film. Next we have Ice Station Zebra, which is again a classic MacLean trope, which is it's set in the Arctic. Now, I'm the kind of person that used to go through these very deep binges as a child. And by binges, I mean that I would find a topic, like for example, Egyptian mythology. And then I would just deep dive into it. I would just be super obsessive and I would just spend, you know, months at a time just reading that and nothing else. I couldn't get it out of my mind. I would just go back and just, you know, read everything that I could find. I've gotten a little bit better as I grow older, and just because, you know, with the internet, it's kind of hard to be just focused, like laser focused on one particular topic. But I went through a period where I was just really fascinated by the polar expeditions, both the expeditions to the South Pole and the North Pole, and just the, you know, the grit and the determination and the tragedy that attended those events, and how they really were giant adventures for all humanity. So this particular book and this other one called Night Without End, which is also similarly famous. Night Without End also has this romantic subplot that some of you might enjoy more than Ice Station Zebra. But to me, Ice Station Zebra is the better book, just because there is this air of menace that's in the air. Like, you know, you can feel it almost, you know, what it must be like to be so isolated and in the middle of nowhere, and to not know who the enemy is, or even the fact that there is an enemy. And then to realize that all this time you've been stalked by an enemy and you didn't even know who that was. And then the climax where you find out what was happening, and then how he outsmarted the bad guys. It's one of my favorite endings. This book was also made into a film, but the film is best described as a loose adaptation in my opinion. So yeah. And last up we have Fear is the Key, which again uses a couple of different hallmarks of MacLean's writing. One, there's a lot of underwater action, and you'll see that in a bunch of his novels. And then the main protagonist, again, goes behind enemy lines and he pretends to be someone. And the reason why this book really sticks out in my memory is because of this thing that MacLean does, where he describes a man who has lost everything. The emotional devastation of that first part of the book, where he describes, you know, our male protagonist has lost his family, and it does such a good job of setting up the stakes for this man. And he does that in a bunch of different novels, even his lesser novels like Partisans, for example. There are these short passages about men who have experienced loss, in like terrible violent loss due to acts of terror or during wartime. And they really are the best example of such writing, because it's not exploitative or brushed aside. I mean, he allows his characters to stop and feel that loss, and by doing that he allows you as a reader to understand the gravity of that loss. And in my experience, not a lot of men write about loss the way MacLean does. And maybe it's because, you know, he was a soldier himself, he was in the Navy, and I don't know, I just really find it affecting. Fear is the Key is also really super satisfying in its ending and how it resolves its different threads. because at the end, by the time he does what he does, you really want him to succeed, you know, because you've had that emotional arc and you have that connect to him as a character and the pain that he's gone through. You really want him to get what he is trying to accomplish, and then the way he does it is also super satisfying. There's a lot of 20th century, like mid 20th century popular fiction that is really enjoyable and sort of not disposable. Like, you know, that's my biggest complaint against a lot of thrillers that are being written today, in that the prose is almost disposable. You know, it could have been written by a bunch of monkeys. Evocative prose with strong action and excellent character development, these are things that I really associate with mid-century popular fiction. And MacLean is right at the top of people that I recommend when people say that they want to read something that's fun but also has a bit of gravitas. He's definitely one of my favorites, and I hope you'll give him a chance. For more videos, please hit the subscribe button.